Welcome to this explainer. I am seriously so excited to guide you through today's topic because we're looking at what is arguably one of the most fascinating books ever written about the human brain. It's Dr. Oliver Sacks' absolute masterpiece, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. Now, we aren't just going to look at dry clinical medical anomalies today, not at all. We are going to explore some deeply profound, real-world human experiences that reveal both the staggering resilience and, frankly, the terrifying fragility of the mind.
Okay, let's dive into this with a really powerful thought. You have to begin to lose your memory, if only in bits and pieces, to realize that memory is what makes our lives. This quote perfectly sets the stage for our journey today. Because when the fundamental systems of our brain misfire, our very reality, our sense of time, and even our sense of self begin to fracture in ways that are, well, almost unimaginable.
And that incredibly delicate balance is exactly what Dr. Oliver Sacks captured so brilliantly. You see, he was a pioneering neurologist, but he didn't just write sterile clinical case studies. He managed to bridge this huge gap between complex neuroscience and beautiful literary storytelling. Through his work, he really humanized his patients, showing us that behind every single damaged neural pathway is a real person trying to navigate a world that has suddenly become deeply, deeply strange. Today, we're going to walk through 3 of his most remarkable clinical tales.
Section 1. Case 1. The Man and the Hat. Let me introduce you to Dr. P. He was a distinguished musician and a highly respected music teacher living in New York City. By all standard measures, he was a man of great cultivation, immense charm, and intellect. But he started displaying some very peculiar behaviors. At first, the symptoms started small. Dr. P would occasionally fail to recognize the faces of his own students, only realizing who they were once they actually spoke. But then it escalated. While walking down the street, he would amiably pat the tops of fire hydrants and parking meters, genuinely believing they were the heads of children. And in the most famous incident, right after a visit with Dr. Sacks, he reached out, grabbed his wife's head, and literally tried to lift it off to put it on his own head. He honestly thought his wife was his hat. The craziest part? He didn't feel ill. He was perfectly healthy, funny, sharp as a tack. He just interacted with his visual environment in this wildly distorted, almost comical way.
Let's move to how this builds, because Dr. Sacks was completely baffled. He put Dr. P through a series of visual tests to figure out what was going on. First, geometric shapes and playing cards. Dr. P identified those instantly, no problem. But when Dr. Sacks turned on a movie, Dr. P couldn't recognize any of the actors, nor could he read their emotional expressions. The mystery really deepened when Sacks handed him a fresh, real red rose. Dr. P didn't see a flower. Instead, he described it as a convoluted red form with a linear green attachment. When handed a glove, he called it a continuous surface enfolded on itself. It was wild. He could clearly identify the abstract geometric features of an object, but he had entirely lost the ability to grasp what the object actually was.
So what does this all mean? Well, Dr. P was suffering from a severe form of visual agnosia, and more specifically, prosopagnosia, which is the inability to recognize faces. To understand the neuroscience here in a really simple way, think of human vision as a 2-step process. First, your eyes see the raw data, the lines, colors, and shapes. Second, your brain integrates those details and matches them to your memories to give the object its meaning. Dr. P's eyes worked perfectly, but that critical second step in his brain was catastrophically broken. He could see all the individual parts, but he could no longer see the meaningful whole.
Now, what's absolutely fascinating here is the specific brain region involved. In a healthy brain, the temporo-occipital lobes do the heavy lifting of taking all those visual details and integrating them into a unified, meaningful picture. But in Dr. P's case, a massive tumor or some sort of degenerative process was slowly destroying these specific visual processing centers. His intellect, completely intact. But because of this highly localized dysfunction, his brain could only process visual fragments, kind of like an abstract puzzle, failing entirely to construct a holistic, recognizable image. He was basically living in a world of lifeless abstractions.
So how on earth did he survive? Well, he survived through symphony. Because his temporal lobes, the specific areas responsible for his musical genius, were completely untouched, Dr. P managed to replace the visual meaning of the world with musical organization. He literally created a song for eating, a song for dressing, a song for bathing. If he was interrupted and lost the melody, he would freeze, totally unable to recognize his own clothes or even his own body. Seeing this absolutely incredible adaptation, Dr. Sacks prescribed the only medicine that made any sense. He told Dr. P to make music his entire life. And he did. He kept teaching music right up until his final days.
Section 2. Case 2. The Lost Mariner.
Our second case is both fascinating and honestly, deeply tragic. I want you to meet Jimmy G. He was a vibrant, strong, charming 49-year-old guy admitted to a hospice care facility in New York back in 1975. When Dr. Sachs first met Jimmy, he seemed perfectly normal, totally coherent. But within minutes of conversation, Jimmy looked around at the elderly patients in the hospital beds and uttered this absolutely heartbreaking quote. "If I don't work here, I've been put here. Am I a patient? Am I sick and don't know it, Doc? It's crazy. It's scary." Jimmy was intensely bewildered. And it gets worse. If Dr. Sachs left the room for just 2 minutes and came back, Jimmy had absolutely no idea who he was. Jimmy had lost the ability to form any new memories whatsoever.
To Jimmy, it is perpetually this year, 1945. In his mind, Jimmy firmly believes he's a 19-year-old radio operator serving on a submarine in the U.S. Navy. The last 3 decades of his life, his entire adulthood, all of it, have been completely wiped from his mind. He is entirely severed from his present reality, anchored to a past that ended 30 years ago.
So, the crucial point is understanding the medical diagnosis behind this tragic time loop. Jimmy was suffering from Korsakoff's syndrome. This is a brutal form of chronic amnesia that includes both anterograde and retrograde amnesia, which basically means you can't form new memories and you also lose access to recent past memories. And the most shocking part about this condition? It's primarily caused by a severe deficiency in thiamine, which is just vitamin B1.
In Jimmy's case, years of heavy drinking after he left the Navy caused a massive nutritional deficit, and that physically damaged his brain. Specifically, it destroyed these tiny little structures at the base of the brain called the mammillary bodies. In a healthy brain, these structures act as a critical relay station for memory formation and temporal anchoring. Without them, your brain simply cannot hit the record button. The destruction of these tiny structures essentially erased 3 entire decades of Jimmy's life and trapped him in this eternal, wildly disoriented present.
Now, traditional neuropsychology offered absolutely no cure for Jimmy. The damage was done, his memory was gone forever. But Dr. Sachs discovered something truly incredible here. A person is so much more than just their memory. He noticed that when Jimmy attended church services, or took communion, or worked out in the garden, his frantic, scary disorientation completely vanished. He showed total focus and this profound sense of peace. Engaging in acts of spiritual and moral meaning allowed Jimmy to find a deep continuity of self. It beautifully proved that our emotional and spiritual identity can actually outlast the mechanical destruction of our memory systems.
Section 3. Case 3. The Disembodied Lady.
And this brings us to our final narrative arc, the story of Christina. She was a 27-year-old mother and computer programmer. She was just in the hospital awaiting a totally routine surgery to remove her gallbladder when she was struck by a terrifying, unimaginable symptom. Out of nowhere, Christina became incredibly unsteady on her feet. She kept dropping things, and then her entire physical form just seemed to collapse. She mouthed to Dr. Sachs in this ghostly, flat voice, "Something awful's happened. I can't feel my body. I feel weird, disembodied." Think about the visceral horror of that. She had completely 100% lost the sensation of owning or even inhabiting her own physical form.
Her physical reality was completely altered in an instant. Without any natural, unconscious sense of her body, Christina couldn't even sit up straight. She was as floppy as a rag doll. To compensate for this, she had to adopt these highly conscious, forced, almost theatrical poses, kind of like a dancer frozen in mid-pose, just to maintain basic posture. Her body had essentially gone completely blind and deaf to itself.
So what exactly happened here? What Christina lost is a sense that most of us don't even know we have. It's called proprioception. Discovered back in the 1890s, proprioception is our hidden sixth sense. It's the continuous, completely unconscious sensory flow from our muscles, our tendons, our joints that tells the brain exactly where our body parts are in space at any given moment. It's how you can easily touch your nose with your eyes closed. Without proprioception, we literally wouldn't feel like our bodies belong to us at all.
Let's break down the science of her illness. Normally, healthy spinal and cranial nerves are sending constant, automatic updates to the parietal lobes of your brain, maintaining your body image. But a spinal tap revealed that Christina suffered from an incredibly rare condition called acute sensory polyneuritis. Basically, massive inflammation had completely destroyed the sensory roots of her nerves. The physical connection between her body and her perfectly intact brain was severed. Her parietal lobes were working just fine, but they were receiving zero data. Her brain literally had no physical evidence that her body even existed. And because this hidden sense is so fundamental to how we exist, society really lacks the words, and honestly the sympathy, for its loss. When Christina would stumble on a bus, people would angrily ask if she was blind drunk. It was awful. She eventually realized a terrifying truth. Because her body could no longer feel itself, she had to consciously use her other senses to become the eyes and ears of her own limbs.
But the resilience she showed was just astounding. She underwent this grueling, arduous path to artificial movement. She essentially had to learn to operate her own body like a machine. Think about this. If she wanted to pick something up, she had to lock her eyes onto her hands and visually guide them to the object. Because she couldn't feel her own vocal cords, she had to use auditory feedback, literally listening to her own voice, just to modulate her speech. Every single everyday task, stuff we do without thinking, required supreme, exhausting visual and mental vigilance.
Tragically, there was never any neurological recovery for Christina. She successfully regained the ability to function. She actually returned home, went back to her computer terminal, and raised her children, but she never regained the feeling of her body. She described herself as being pithed, feeling like a disembodied wraith, continually experiencing the sensation that her body was dead and unreal. She truly survives as a modern, unsung hero of neurological affliction, trapped in an unimaginable state, yet fighting every single day to live a life within it.
Section 4. The Resilience of Identity.
These three incredible clinical tales from Oliver Sacks's book show us a deeply human-first approach to neurology. Dr. P, Jimmy G, and Christina weren't just patients with damaged temporo-occipital lobes or atrophied mammillary bodies or sensory polyneuritis. They were human beings forced to reconstruct their realities using whatever intact pieces of their minds remained. Which leaves us with this final, profound question to think about. When perception, memory, and even the feeling of our own physical bodies are stripped away, what is it that truly makes us us? I highly encourage you to pick up Oliver Sacks's book to explore these questions further. The human mind is incredibly fragile for sure, but as these stories show, the human spirit is just relentlessly resilient. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the incredible world inside your head.